Chapter 16. Happy for you. That evening, Sky and Jessie debated which card game to play. Sky wrinkled her face and rolled her eyes at Wade's obvious suggestion of strip poker and ignored him. Deciding on Go Fish, Sky and Jessie invited the men, but they refused. Dylan seemed to keep his distance, instead preferring to clean his weapons at the kitchen table. Wade stated if they would not play a game he wanted, he would not play theirs. Sky and Jessie sat on the floor, spreading the cards out between them. As they played, Jessie happily chatted with all of them. "We used to play games during my sessions all the time. Sky always let me pick the game." Sky prompted him. "Which was always?" "Jenga, of course, because you suck at it and I always win." "Yes, thanks for that, by the way." Sky laughed at both his pride and the truth of his words. "So, what did you have sessions for? Are you crazy, kid?" Wade asked. Sky sighed. Leave it to Wade to undo weeks of therapy. But Jessie took it in stride, answering him with his same bubbly manner. "No, I got taken from my dad, so I had to see a therapist." Wade opened his mouth again to continue with what Sky could only assume would be another stupid remark, so she shot him a "you better shut it" look. At that, Wade hoisted himself out of his recliner to sift through the vast array of chips that still occupied the side table in the kitchen. Dylan grumbled at his brother in a low voice Sky couldn't catch, then stretched out on the floor beside Jessie. "You played games at therapy? Sounds like fun." "Yeah, Sky's pretty fun. Course she had to do some things for her job, so she had to ask me questions now and then, but mostly, it was fun." Jessie turned to her with a glint in his eye. "'Cause I beat her but every time in Jenga." Sky smirked at him, surprised he admitted it was entertaining because as far as she could recall, he'd spent much of it in a sullen mood. She poked him in the ribs. "Hey, I was busy being the world's best therapist. It's hard to do that and win games too." "Oh yeah," Jessie taunted, "but I bet if we had a Jenga game here you'd still lose." We'll just have to wonder about that since we don't have one," she teased. Dylan seemed more at ease with Jessie tonight than Sky ever remembered him. A shadow of a smile rested on his mouth. It was not a teasing smirk or a sarcastic snort, those she had experienced before, but the grin of a happy man. It reminded her of the first time Jessie had smiled that way for her. Just the tiniest upturn of the lips, a subtle softening of the face. One didn't dare show you noticed, or it would evaporate at once. She wondered if Dylan would be the same. Sky caught Dylan's eye and shared a small smile of her own. He returned her grin for a few seconds, then glanced at Wade and cleared his throat. Dylan hopped to his feet. "Welp, I better finish those dishes." Sky allowed her eyes to settle on Dylan's back. "Well, that is an improvement to what he would have done a few days ago." Sky checked herself. She was drawing closer to all three of them much faster than she had anticipated. Jessie, she had expected and looked forward to, but the two men, especially Dylan, that was a surprise. Uneasy, she resettled herself on the floor. She was leaving. Becoming emotionally closer to someone, relying on them, that wasn't part of the plan and would only make it harder when it came time to leave. Sky bit the inside of her cheek and ran a finger down the pattern of wood grain floor as she realized how often her gaze turned to Dylan if he were near, and how many times her thoughts strayed to him when he wasn't. When they were in the same vicinity, Sky sensed his intense stare lingering on her, and more often than not, he would end up beside her. Her mind wandered to her disastrous marriage. It was a sharp reminder of how inept she was at relationships. "And that is why I stay away from men, I'm not ready for this." Sky stared at Dylan as he stood at the sink, his back to her. She followed the motion of his body as he slid a cloth over a shiny, tan-colored plate. His broad shoulders swayed back and forth, biceps jumped in tandem with the movement of his rough hands in the sudsy water. Attraction battled her uncertainty as amusement over what she found attractive slipped over it all. There is nothing sexier than watching a man do the dishes. Sky forced her gaze away, instead looking out the window at the rolling, green-topped mountains. As soon as I hear from Tom, the decision will be out of my hands. I'll be going home.
Wade nodded his head to Sky when she tipped hers, indicating she was headed outside. Jessie bounded up off the floor and followed her. Wade watched as they jumped off the porch, laughing, a warm spot growing in his chest. It was real nice having them here. He liked it. He flung a glance Dylan's way as his brother returned to the table. Dylan sat in his chair, muscles tight, as if he expected to burst out of it at any time. Wade shook his head. He wished he could say it was his brother's nervousness over Sky and Jessie outside alone, as his quick glances to them gave away, but it wasn't. Dylan had been this way since he was a boy, and it was his quick reflexes that had saved him a ton of hurt when their father had come after him. If Dylan hadn't given up that stance by now, he had to wonder if he ever would. Did the man ever really rest? They didn't get an opportunity to talk alone as often anymore, so Wade reckoned he better say what he needed to say while he could. Dylan returned to the table. Wade poured himself a cup of coffee and offered to refill Dylan's, then joined him. Wade cleared his throat. He didn't want to mess this up. So I wanted to talk about Sky. Dylan gave him a sharp glance and cut him off. No need. I see where it's headin'. Yeah? Wade asked, before adding, that's good, real good. I think it's coming along, bro. Can't wait to see what the next step brings. Wade nudged Dylan and gave a low chuckle. A look of pain flashed across his brother's face. Dylan let out a slow sigh and said, I'm real happy for you. Wade reared back in his seat. Real happy for me? His entire body rocked with amusement. Dylan frowned as his indignation flamed. Stop. It's one thing to sit here with you bragging about it, but another for you to make fun of me. Wade held up his hands as he struggled to swallow his chuckles. I'm real happy for you, bro. For you. Wade poked a finger into Dylan's shoulder. You idiot, all that tracking, and you can't read what is right in front of you. Surprise darted across Dylan's face, and Wade slapped his forearm a couple of times. She's a real nice lady. She's a bit uptight for me. She keeps eyeing you up though. When Dylan turned to stare out the window at Sky running around the yard with Jessie, something lit in his brother he hadn't seen in a long time. A small flare of hope burned in his eyes.